Wonder why sometimes I'm feeling under.
Not possible and without all of the participants. And tomorrow we will actually be taking all of the first 5 sessions and try and move them into a strategy for action. So a really exciting set of panelists today. We're excited for that. There will be some time for questions and answers, but of course, some folks can't stay with us for the whole webinar, so we'll do the best we can to allow them to take questions. But we're really excited to be here. A huge thank you to our sponsors, Elevate Energy and the CS Mott Foundation. And also a huge thank you to the All About Water Steering Committee that continues to develop these events and really ensure that they happen in a way that helps community. So thank you for being here, and let's continue. Thanks, Christy.
Thanks, Jill. I'm going to be super quick, but over the past 2 weeks, we have heard how oppression of my sisters and brothers of color and the poor have led to inequitable practices and policies to access clean, safe, and affordable water. Today, as we embark on this journey of talking about policy, I invite you to listen and hear how by creating a new story of community, a new story of us, we can rise to create affordable water for all. And who better to moderate this discussion than the extraordinarily inspiring Miss Monica Lewis-Patrick, co-founder, president, and CEO of We the People of Detroit. She is also known as a water warrior and is an educator, entrepreneur, and human rights activist advocate. She has served as Director of Community Outreach and Engagement for We the People of Detroit since 2009 and was unanimously elected by the board to become the president and CEO. Monica is actively engaged in almost every struggle on behalf of Detroit residents. She is an active member of the International Joint Commission, Water Quality Board, U.S. Human Rights Network, Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, and DREM.org, and was named to the World Water Justice Council in October of 2015. As a former lead legislative policy analyst for Detroit City Council, Monica has authored legislation, conducted research, and delivered constituency services to thousands of city residents. And Monica, please take it away. Thank you so much for being here today and for moderating this.
Well, peace and blessings. Thank you so much, Christy. As always, you are amazing, and I really appreciate the fact that you're always thoughtful. And so I know that a lot of work has gone into putting this panel together, and let's get it started. First of all, let me say what an honor and privilege it is to be a part of the steering committee and the sort of the power hub of this All About Water convening. I know that not only the steering committee, but the amazing team of Freshwater Futures has really brought to you what I think is going to be a power-packed day of information, of expertise, and then some action steps, because we want to get moving. But first, I want to just talk a little bit about what sort of frames today's activities. And one of those things is that we started out in about 4.5 years ago. I had no idea what Freshwater Futures was. Did not know that the entity existed because my water work was just isolated to figuring out how in the great city of Detroit that I could get affordable water to the residents. But it's been through this very fruitful partnership that my eyes have opened up to that there are multiple water issues, but all of those water issues are joined at the hip around figuring out how to make sure that we keep water clean, safe, affordable, and accessible. And so learning this at Freshwater Futures, one of the things that we figured out very quickly is there was this great divide between what the community understood about not only water, but water management, water governance, but also many times people of color and most impacted communities were never invited to the conversations or to the tables where these decisions were being made. And so thank God I got a call one evening late from Melissa Damaski of the Herb Foundation. And Melissa asked me if I could show up the next morning in Lansing for a very important meeting where all of these major stakeholders and power brokers were making decisions about water And many of the decisions that were going to be made were going to impact communities like Benton Harbor, Detroit, Flint, more drastically than anywhere else. Well, being a water warrior, that meant I had to get up early and get myself to Lansing. Well, I sat in a room, and as I looked across the room, I saw faces I didn't know, but I saw smiles that connected. And so I saw across the room this very tall, small, petite lady by the name of Jill Ryan. And Jill Ryan was beating the table, demanding that there would be more community involved in this conversation. And there were other large environmental groups at the table, so they began to join with Jill, but Jill was the one that reached out. And so when Jill's reaching out, she and I met and began to have conversations about what it is or what we could do to hopefully advance, one, getting more people involved in water justice work, but then also making sure community voice is present everywhere decisions are being made about water issues. And so thank God for Jill Ryan showing up that day. Thank God for Melissa Damaski reaching out. But out of that, Jill and I formed a collaborative partnership that then led to deeper conversations. And one of the things we had to honestly talk about is that many times community is being talked about and talked to, but not spoken with. And so we really wanted to come together and bring together the best of large environmental justice groups, those huge groups, those groups that sometimes don't talk about human rights, but they talk about fish and cats and dogs and the land. And so it was with this collaboration that we began to reach out. I knew a lot of grassroots groups. Jill knew grassroots groups and also knew large environmental groups. And so through that collaboration, we began to convene these conversations and open it up to others to talk about how could we work together. Well, All About Water was a great convening space because what happened is that conversation then bubbled up to the All About Water conference. And then at that conference, what happened is that it was decided that there would be a second day of convening to have a deeper conversation just about water affordability. Well, what was so powerful about that moment was that you had groups representing the various issues from across the state. You had people that were leading and very much involved in what was happening with PFAS. You also had a situation where you had groups that were dealing with rural issues and what was happening with sub-tanks and well replacements. You then had communities like Flint and other communities that were dealing with lead pipe replacement. You had communities like Detroit that was not only dealing with toxicity and lead issues, but our major issue was that we had an unaffordable rate structure because of what had happened in terms of the racist policies that had targeted Detroit, because Detroit was the only city with the bonding capacity to build out this infrastructure to the suburbs. And so it was through all of this collaborative conversation that many of us on the grassroots side of the water justice work came to the table, actually broadening our understanding around how water systems are financed, around how water systems that are equitable and just are governed. And then we all had examples of what had not been the best practices. We had seen what had happened with austerity playing out all across Michigan and throughout the Great Lakes. We were the poster child in Detroit for unaffordable water rates. We were the poster child in Flint for lead toxicity. We became the poster child in Benton Harbor for the seizing of lakefront property away from Black hands and Black control. And so knowing all of these stories from the grassroots side, it became a wonderful moment for us to educate the rest of these decision makers and stakeholders and funders about what would be best for us. Because as we're hearing right now in the term of Black Lives Matter, what we know is that only Black lives can matter when those issues are connected to improving the quality of life of Black and brown people. And what we also know is that when quality of life issues are addressed for the most impacted, it actually improves quality of life for all of us. And so we have a term that we use in Detroit that we've adopted from the Honorable Councilwoman Joanne Watson. We've continued to deputize ourselves, continuing to learn, to embrace this new way. And so out of all of this convening that has happened over the last 3.5, 4 years, there was a gathering together of a design team. And that design team consisted of about 12 to 15 leaders from across the state and the region, putting together what we call the 10-point must-haves. And the 10-point must-haves are rooted in a value system. They're rooted in equity and justice. They are framed around what the community says is good for them. And it was adopted and embraced not only by the grassroots and only by those that are in this struggle for water affordability and accessibility, but it was actually embraced and supported by the larger environmental justice groups. And so out of that, what we became really excited about, even in the last 6 months, is that other states and other groups are now using the 10-point must-have as a foundational piece of how they are advancing water affordability and water equity all across the country. So before I close, I want to really give a shout out to the state of Ohio that has used the 10-point must-have and is also very fastly on a pace to advance water affordability in the great state of Ohio. We are in conversations with the state of Washington and the state of Oregon that are also looking at the 10-point must-haves as foundational. So what I would say at this moment before we introduce our speakers, bravo to you, All About Water, for taking that first bold step, for doing that hard work, and for establishing a groundswell around the 10-point must-haves to ensure that water equity and water justice is embraced for every American. And so this is the thing that we're celebrating in this moment, is the exceptional leadership that has come through Freshwater Future and many of your partners that have gathered around this idea that it's only through the commons that when we all can drink, that when we all have access, that is the uplift of humanity, and that is what we must commit ourselves to do. That we will not stop and we will not rest until every American has access to clean, safe, and affordable water. And we also know that Freshwater Futures has exceptional partnerships also in Canada. And so it's also been through Indigenous relationships. And it's been through the leadership that we've seen through Indigenous family, especially Indigenous women, as it relates to water, respecting the spirit of water, understanding that we are water, and through that relationship, treating water more like our family and relative, as opposed to treating it as a commodity and something to be bartered and sold. And so I just thank you so much for hearing me. We're opening now to our speakers, but I can't tell you what a great day it's going to be for all of us when we can usher in the human right to water and everyone has access to it. So now to get down to the nitty-gritty. We have for you today some of the greatest minds across the state and around the nation, not only our local leaders and local organizers and visionaries, but what I'm prepared to present to you is the solutionaries in this moment for how we're going to advance water affordability. And so the first person that I'll introduce to you is the great Councilwoman Mary Alice Adams from the great city of Benton Harbor. Councilmember Adams is serving her 3rd term on the Benton Harbor City Council. She is the co-chairwoman of the Planning and Economic Development Committee. In this role, she is working with local youth on homelessness, the local community center, and Freshwater Future and the Benton Harbor Water Council to ensure the city residents have safe drinking water. At the legislative chair for the City Council, Councilwoman Adams has spearheaded the local marijuana ordinance, which spurred about $100,000 for the city coffers. Councilwoman Adams also is a board member of the Brownfield Authority. That is creating a new environmental studies curriculum in Benton Harbor's high school. She also cares deeply about raising young political leaders of tomorrow through the engagement of voter registration, involvement in city government, and she is the community point of contact for My Brother's Keeper and Black Lives Matter Global Network. Councilwoman Adams is also a proud owner of a Different Direction beauty salon and is a certified medical wig maker. I present to some, introduce to others, the great Councilwoman Adams.
Oh, good morning, everyone. And Monica, thank you. I don't know where to begin because you pretty much said it all. But listening to your story, you just reminded me of why I ran for office. You know, I hate the word politician and I hate politics because that's what's wrong in America. We get people into office and they play these political games with our lives instead of taking care of business. I like to consider myself as the people's servant. Um, you know, I came into this water thing um, maybe more than 4 years ago. It may have been 5. I know it was right before the Flint water crisis happened when they switched over from Detroit. We have a lovely queen in the community that works on community gardening that happens to be Miss Emma Kennard. And Reverend Pinckney and her started this thing about putting a garden in each ward unit and doing a contest of the most beautifulest garden. However, I started my garden, and that's when I met someone from Freshwater Future or someone that was doing an article, I can't even remember, until I saw this article in a book. But before all this, we had went into a state of emergency with the state of Michigan under Snyder and Al Pashoka bill that they presented. And we were afraid here in Benton Harbor, knowing that we were, you know, gentrification is real. And we were fearful of losing our water plant since others were joined to us, like St. Joe and the township. They broke away and got their own water departments, and it sits on a very valuable piece of land, which is Jean Clark Park, a park that was given to Benton Harbor children. And as we just began to watch over our assets, this big fight started over the EM law. And before we knew it, what we were watching actually happened in Flint when the water was switched. And mind you, I used to live in Flint. I'm originally from Benton Harbor, but my mom is in Flint. I have a lot of nieces, nephews that dwell in Flint. And I remember watching TV one evening, and this lady was holding up a bottle, several of them, at a council meeting. And I'm like, that water is yellow. And I realized that it was Flint that they were talking about. And I'm like, oh my God, I just sprung up like, what in the world is going on? And after that, they had a town hall meeting with one of the congressmen. I forgot his name, but Reverend Bullock from Detroit. And I drove up to this town hall meeting to make my presence known, to make sure that I was representing my people of Flint, even though I'm a councilwoman for the city of Benton Harbor. But I like to be informed of what's going on, because this EM law had not only hit Flint, Detroit, Ecorse, Benton Harbor, actually all of the predominantly Black communities in the state of Michigan. So I was surely in my mindset thinking that this was coming to a city near, you know, us, and it was. And thanks to Reverend Pinckney, in his absence, however, is when this happened. But when Reverend Pinckney showed up, and he put together, they started off a water committee, and something about it didn't have enough power to it. And when he came to the council members asking, actually demanding that we do something, and they formed this council, and they needed some power behind it to hold us elected officials, as well as those in the position that oversee our water, accountable for getting things to the state on time when it comes to water levels, contaminants, and all of that. We've had a vast majority of problems throughout the city of Benton Harbor, and I'm sure America as a whole, but I'm gonna just stick with Michigan for right now, because we are sitting on an age-old infrastructure to where the residents of Benton Harbor has incurred $15–20 million to upgrade a plant that others have left from, and the citizens of Benton Harbor with an income under 10,000 are left to pay this bill. Now, mind you, the water bill steady climbs every now and then. And because we are trying our best to fix the infrastructure after putting forth the city income tax with Whirlpool corporate office in the community brought in quite a few tax dollars. But thanks to COVID, things are shifting and changing, and the citizens are left holding the bill. I don't know where we're going from here other than to just hold on to faith and hope and pray that something gives on a federal level to help us fix the age-old infrastructure. Because now that the water may be fresh, coming from the water plant itself, it's traveling through old pipes and it's contaminated by the time it gets to the homes. And I'm just going to do what the people elected me to do with my colleagues to inform them. I'm the one that tries to make meetings, as many as I can, because I see nobody else does. And being a owner of my own establishment, I can pretty much, you know, juggle my own schedule and try to be where I need to be and see how things are affecting my community. So I'm grateful that Reverend Pinckney and the Water Council stepped up and that we gave them the authority to work with our plant manager, Mr. O'Malley, to actually find out any information they need to keep up with data and making sure that things that the state requests is in on time and holding him accountable, as well as the elected officials. I could go on because there's so much more, but I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Pinckney. Or back to Monica.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman. And as you've heard, there has been exceptional leadership in Benton Harbor for a long time. And that leadership has been dedicated to ushering in and ensuring quality water, clean water, affordable water for the people of Benton Harbor. And so, Councilwoman Mary Alice Adams, we just want to thank you and salute you for all of your leadership and all of the exceptional work that you're doing to ensure that on behalf of the people of Benton Harbor. And now we want to introduce to you another great leader from the city of Benton Harbor. He is the myth and the legend, as Brandon would say. He is our Reverend Edward Pinckney. He is also a personal mentor of mine and a good friend of my mama's. Reverend Pinckney, the founder of Black Autonomy Network Community Organization, was founded in 1998. Reverend Pinckney has spoken at more than 28 universities across the country, which includes speaking at Harvard, the University of Michigan, Michigan State University, the University of California at Berkeley, the University of California at Mercer, Cornell University, and the list goes on and on. Reverend Pinckney earned a degree in science. Reverend Pinckney was the first to deal with the juvenile lifer and helped to bring them home. Reverend Pinckney worked to change the law in reference to the court-appointed attorneys. Reverend Pinckney has court watched for over 20 years. But in 2019, the Benton Harbor Community Water Council was formed. Reverend Pinckney was elected to be the chairman of the Benton Harbor Community Water Council and is dedicated to community coalition building that informs, trains, and mobilizes the citizens of Benton Harbor and beyond to improve their quality of life. As a community-based grassroots organization, Benton Harbor Community Water Council aims to inform, educate, and empower Benton Harbor residents to get clean water. I introduce to some and present to others the great Reverend Pinckney from the great city of Benton Harbor. Reverend Pinckney, take it away.
Reverend, you are muted.
Reverend Pinckney, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes, there you go. Oh,
all right, we all said Monica Lewis, Patrick, and Deborah Taylor. I want to thank both of y'all for the water that y'all contribute to our community on yesterday. We distribute more than 300 cases of water and over 100 gallons of additional water to the community on yesterday, the Benton Harbor Community Water Council. And we really want to thank you because it would not have been done without you. And you and Deborah, y'all went beyond the call of duty and put this into operation. And we had a plan. When we started this the water giveaway on yesterday, it was more than just to give away water. See, what we was going to do, we took surveys of the people coming in. Over 300 people arrived at the place to receive water, but each one, we took a survey to find out whether they had a water filter or not. And we asked them a simple question: do you have a water filter? And the answer is usually yes or no, and we kept it going. Matter of fact, the line was so long that we had to twist it around, and we also had to help the city of Benton Harbor Police Department to help us coordinate this. Because to me, it's important that we have clean water here. It's more important that people understand the work that's being done. We can do nothing. We can do nothing unless we get together and do this together. And the Benton Harbor Community Water Council went beyond the call of duty yesterday to make sure that every single person that came to our place on yesterday received water. And also we asked the big question: do you have a water filter? Which was crucial. And we discovered that over 40% of the people that came had a water filter. And that means that 60% of them did not. And we also asked them if they had a working water filter, which simply means that they have a replacement, or was it flashing red or green or whatever. We needed to know that also. And we also discovered over 30% that even had water filters did not have a working water filter, because if it's flashing red, it's not working. So what we did, we took our survey and we wanted to make sure that we was going to be doing the things that need to be done for our community more than anything else. And people understood exactly where we was at, because the Water Council, we're more than just there to pass out water. We want to make sure that, you know, that having a water filter is just a band-aid for the problem, but we want to fix the problem. And that's what we do. When we first became partners with the city of Benton Harbor for this Water Council, their idea was that, you know, that we were just a group of individuals that didn't really know what they was doing, but they found out that we was an organized group of people, because I believe in organization. That's what I believe in. And what we did, we went out and water tested the water community, because since 2018, the city of Benton Harbor has not been in compliance with the federal or state in reference to the water testing. So we went out in less than 3 weeks, tested over 62 homes, and just to make sure that the water was clean and whatever it is. But we didn't have the opportunity to send it out. So only thing we did was tested the water, turned it over to the city of Benton Harbor, and they sent it out to be tested. So, you know, only thing we couldn't sign, put our initial behind it, for the simple reason we don't know what happened after we turned it over to the city of Benton Harbor. But my goal, more or less, was to make sure that the people understood that this had to be done. And that's exactly what we did. We also was trying to partnership with the Barron County Health Department with the water filters, because when we first started off, we had a plan to make sure that everybody had a water filter. And the Barron County Health Department was giving them out, but they didn't have a plan. They figured that people was just going to come and pick up a water filter. You know, it don't work that way in the Black community. You have to be inside the Black community so you can understand who you are and who they dealing with. Because to me, that's more important than anything else. So what we did, we had several events at my church, and they would come and bring their water filters and pass them out. If they had not came during that period of time, it would have been a failed event for them. For them, because they did not do the job that they supposed to do. But with our help, we helped them distribute more than 1,000 water filters. And by doing that, it enhanced the chance of the people in the city of Benton Harbor having clean water. We had an opportunity on yesterday to distribute maybe 100 to 200 water filters, but unfortunately, the Barron County Health Department did not show up. But it's okay. You know, we know what we got to do. We know what we have to do, and that's what we do. To me, it's more important that we do our job and make sure that people have clean water than anything else. And always, you know, to me, we always have a plan, and we execute the plan, we follow the plan, and we'll be successful. My job, more or less, is to make sure that the city and the communities and the residents of Benton Harbor have clean water. And that's what the Benton Harbor City Council, Community Water Council do. And it's not just Reverend Pinckney, you know, it's a team of us. And everybody, the young guys yesterday went beyond the call of duty. You know, we had people that actually went through the motions of putting the water in the people's trunk, get them out of there. People was masked up. We made sure of that, and we made sure that we was completing the whole mission, because to me, people understood how important it is for us to get the job done. And it's something that can be done. And here's the thing too, when it comes to water filters, you know, we can't just give them a water filter, because most of them won't put it on. You see, we have to go there. When Brandon and myself, we set up a team where people would, you know, if they wanted a water filter, we will make sure that they have clean water by putting the water filter on the filter, because everybody didn't know how, even if they said they did. And we went to the River Terrace apartment where there's 180 residents living in this one area, and we made sure every single person in that apartment complex had a water filter. We made sure that every single person in that complex had water, bottled water to drink. And we made sure that it was done. And the way we do it, we always execute the plan that we set out to do. We do what needs to be done, which is so important. In order to get things done, you got to plan. And if you don't plan, things are not going to work out. So that is one of the things that we have continued to do. And I got to give kudos to the Benton Harbor Community Water Council, because they all stepped up. It was 96 degrees out there yesterday. And we was out there for 3 to 4 hours, passing out waters, doing different things. And one girl came up and she needed a washer and dryer. I sent her down to the basement of the church, told her, go down there and get that washer and dryer. It's yours. And she
Reverend
said,
Pinckney, you have 2 minutes remaining.
Okay, got 2 minutes remaining. So look, this is so important that we work as a community rather as individuals. As an individual, you can do nothing. And I tell you, we have worked this thing, we have done this thing, and the Benton Harbor Community Water Council has pierced my heart. And I want to make sure that we do what needs to be done. In closing words, I want to reach out to Jill and thank Jill. Without her and Lisa, the Benton Harbor Community Water Council could not exist today. And we know how to partnership with you. We're not asking for no money. We're not asking for nothing. Only thing we care about, clean water. And I don't care. We don't even want gas money if it's not meant to be, because we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And on that note, I will close out and just say thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for all the work. And Monica, Lewis, Patrick, you and Deborah, I tell you, you know, y'all, you have pierced my heart, because I know that you always be there for me, and I appreciate it. And I think kudos to you. You know, you and Deborah, even Deborah, she just called and made sure that everything was good and everything was so smooth yesterday. If you would have saw the plan and how we executed the plan, you would have been proud, Monica. You and Deborah both. Thank you so much. And Elisa and Jill, thank you once again. Hey, Benton Harbor, all up in here.
But definitely want to say kudos to you, Reverend Pinckney, and the Benton Harbor Community Water Council. We always know that you're committed to a vision, and definitely, as we've heard today, you're committed to execution and delivering on your promises. And so we definitely are just celebrating all the work that's happening there, because as you said, it's not just about giving the filters, but it's going that extra mile and making sure that the filters were put on. It's not just saying people need water, but it's actually delivering water to the people. And so we're always just excited and definitely honored to be in your presence, to hear all the great work that you and Councilwoman Adams are leading in Benton Harbor, and also the impact it has not only in Benton Harbor, but it has ripple impacts throughout the state and throughout the nation. And so that takes us right into our next guest, which is State Representative Erica C. Crowley. Ohio State Representative Erica Crowley, Juris Doctorate, Masters of Public Administration, and a doctorate from the District of Columbia. She is a mother, an advocate, and a veteran. So you know I like her. And she currently represents Ohio's 26th House District, which includes much of eastern and southeastern Franklin County. Originally from Youngstown, her family reflects the diversity, success, and struggles of families in Ohio. She is a first-generation college graduate, obtaining a Bachelor's of Arts degree in criminology with a focus on juvenile delinquency from Cleveland State University. She also holds a master's degree in public administration from Walden University and a Juris Doctorate from Capital University Law School. Erica has spent much of her life making a difference by serving others and helping them find their voice. She served in the United States Navy, earning the Naval and Marine Corporal Achievement Medal and the National Defense Service Medal. Additionally, she has advocated on behalf of children and families and the YWCA Head Start, Early Head Start Child Program, court-appointed special advocates for children, and the Black Child Development Institute. Since being sworn into elected office last year, her legislative priorities have focused on maternal health, infant mortality, birth to 5 initiatives, housing and food insecurity, and veterans issues. The House Finance Committee, Finance Subcommittee on Primary and Secondary Education, Primary and Secondary Committee, Armed Services and Veterans Affairs, Correctional Institutions, Inspection Committee, and was appointed to the Governor's Commission on Infant Mortality, the Commission on Minority Health, and is a founding member of Ohio's Black Maternal Health Caucus. She is the mother of twin girls. She enjoys spending time with them and traveling with family and friends. She collects books and is an avid reader. She is also volunteers her time with her community and other organizations. I introduce to some and present to others the exceptional leadership of the State Representative Erica C. Crowley. Take it away, attorney.
Thank you, Monica, so much for that introduction. I don't know that I can follow behind Reverend Pinckney and his passion. It's going to be a hard act to follow. I just want to say thank you to Freshwater Future for inviting me to be on this panel today. It is an absolute pleasure. I want to give a huge shout out to Crystal Davis from the Alliance for the Great Lakes, Melanie Houston and Pete Butcher from the Ohio Environmental Council, and Christy Meyer from Freshwater Future for bringing the concept of the legislation that I'm going to be talking about shortly to me, and then working with me in my office on drafting the Water for All House Bill 639. When I met with these phenomenal people several months ago, we were just meeting to discuss the priorities of the organizations, and one of them was water affordability. And immediately I was like, I am interested in doing some legislation around this issue. I am committed to water being a human right and a fundamental right, and I believe everyone should have access to safe, clean water. It should not be a privilege or a luxury. And unfortunately, since I've been in the legislature a little over a year and a half now, I really haven't even heard anyone discussing water affordability or access to water outside of up in Toledo dealing with the Great Lakes, but just water access in general. There's not a lot of conversation, and it's disheartening, even as we deal with COVID-19. And so for me as a legislator, as was mentioned, I sit on the Primary and Secondary Education Committee, and I can't talk about how important it is for our children to be healthy and how their health impacts their ability to learn without talking about access to water. Additionally, the lack of water service may impact custody of one's children. So the lack of running water could be a factor in determining whether parents are providing a suitable home for their children. As was mentioned, I am the co-founder of the Black Maternal Health Caucus, and I cannot talk about maternal and infant health and decreasing the rate of moms and babies dying without discussing access to water and water affordability, and how families may forego medical expenses and getting treatment that they need, or getting food in order to pay their water bills, and having to make that decision. None of our neighbors, I don't like to say constituents, so I say neighbors, none of my neighbors should have to be in that position and make that hard decision. And then I have sponsored legislation with my colleague, Representative Stephanie House, on racism being a public health crisis. And I can't talk about racism as a public health crisis without discussing redlining and how that impacts homeownership, without discussing how water and sewer lanes can lead to foreclosure and have potentially devastating impact on homeownership rates. And that's been shown to have a disproportionate impact on Black communities and communities of color. In many states, including Ohio, a water service cutoff is tantamount to an eviction, and in some instances, the home may be deemed uninhabitable. And finally, I cannot discuss COVID-19 and how this is a public health crisis without discussing how it is impossible to follow the hygiene guidelines without discussing access to water and water affordability. Obviously, water shutoffs pose a threat to public health and human dignity, and without access to running water, families are unable to cook, bathe, clean, flush the toilets, and brush their teeth. Additionally, so some statistics around water affordability and access to water that we referenced as we were drafting this legislation goes back to 2016, and in more than 15 million Americans, 1 out of every 20 households had their water shut off due to being unable to pay their water bill. It is estimated that by the end of 2022, more than 1/3 of all households across the nation will not be able to pay their water bill. The affordability of basic water and sewer services impacts Ohioans across the state in both urban and rural areas. And as it was mentioned, I'm originally from Youngstown. I represent a portion of Columbus, East and Southeast Columbus. Youngstown is about 2.5 hours away northeast in Ohio. And in Youngstown, 1 out of 8 individuals have had their water service shut off. And according to a 2019 report entitled Water and Sewer Service Affordability in Ohio Assessment and Opportunities for State Policy, a month of basic water and sewer service requires more than 8 hours of labor at minimum wage for nearly 80% of Ohio communities. Another Ohio report found that water costs are disproportionately felt in communities of color, which has been outlined by, I think, every speaker. And how redlining and disinvested communities for decades have a small rate base. So for the Water for All bill, we came up with that name because as we believe everyone should have access to clean water. And so it required a comprehensive statewide strategy. And so the legislation, that some of the points of this legislation, it bans water shutoffs for non-payment. It requires the public water utilities to create a water affordability program based on available income of the household. It requires public water utilities to develop an emergency water assistance program for people who cannot afford to pay their water bill when they fall on hard times. It also provides an opportunity for debt forgiveness for Ohioans who are diligently working to pay down water debt for 2 years or 24 months. And it allows water utilities to use funds generated from ratepayers to create customer assistance programs. And I know my legislative aide, Kelsey, is on the call, or if she can't put it into the chat, ask Christy to do it, or I'll try to do it myself. So there will be a link to House Bill 639, so you can look at it. It's about 7 pages, and you can look at the details of that legislation. And so with that, I can answer any questions that anyone may have about, I think the legislation is in the box for anybody who wants to take a look at it. But I will have to jump off the call at 11 o'clock because I do need to jump on another call, but I am happy to answer any questions that anyone has about this legislation or the work that we're doing. As I said, I sit on many different committees and every committee and piece of legislation that I have worked on since coming into the legislature is inextricably linked to water access and water affordability. My district is 57% Black and people of color. I have the largest population of Black and people of color in Central Ohio. If you look at redlining and the impacts of redlining goes right through my district. And so we see higher rates of asthma, heart disease, cardiovascular problems. People are 52% of the renters in my district are—
Representative Erica Crowley, you have 2 minutes remaining.
Thank you. Are housing insecure, and another 29% are homeowners who are on the brink of having just one incident come up that will make them housing insecure. So, you know, it could be an emergency, like not being able to pay their water bill, that will put them in a situation where they lose their house. So this is something that is very important to me. And like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has, or I will also put the contact information for my office in the chat. Please reach out to me. I would like to, you know, answer any questions that you have or be a resource to anyone and everyone who is working on these issues. And thank you for all that you all are doing to make sure that water is safe and accessible and affordable for all. So thank you.
And thank you. I'm sorry.
That's Reverend Pinckney. Thanks, Representative. Do you have Reynoldsburg in Columbus?
I do. I have a portion of Reynoldsburg. Yes, sir.
I have a son and a daughter both living there. And also, there's a guy by the name of Minister Shea. You might know him.
Mm-hmm.
They're all my friends and my family members. And next time I come to the wonderful city of Columbus, I'm going to try to come visit you.
Oh, absolutely. Please do. I would love to grab coffee and talk with you about the work that you're doing. But yes, I actually live on the border of Columbus and Reynoldsburg. I used to live in Reynoldsburg, and I do represent a portion of it.
Very good. I'll tell my wife about that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, State Representative Erica Crowley. And we just want to once again celebrate your leadership and all the work that you're doing for the great people of Ohio to ensure that they have clean, safe, and affordable water. And we also want to celebrate the fact that you saw the worth and the benefit of the 10-point must-haves in terms of advancing that work. Another point that I want to lift is that you mentioned the historical harms of redlining. And we want to make sure that as we're listening throughout the day, what you will hear is that common thread throughout many of the speakers, and that is part of what we're also up against, is that many of the issues of historic harm are playing out right now, and that is what has led us to many of our urban centers not having the investments that they need because of redlining and the diversion of Black and brown dollars and dollars of poor folks and working folks. And then we also are hearing the public health impacts, which I'm excited about your work connecting it to what's happening to infants and mortality rates and things of that nature. And so we always just want to help connect the dots, that we've got to look for those common threads of how we connect our humanity to our other family around the state and other states and across the nation. So again, we just want to celebrate State Representative Erica Crowley and all of her amazing work to advance water affordability in Ohio. And so if there's no other questions for the state rep, I know she's got to leave. I now want to turn over our Q&A for the next 20 minutes to Christy. So Christy, could you give us some guidance around our question and answers?
Sure. I think Jill was actually going to handle the questions and answers, but I don't see any at the moment. Go ahead, Jill.
Yeah, we don't have any queued up, but I did want to, in her last maybe minute, I wondered if Rep Crowley could just tell us, are there things we can continue to do to support the effort on this piece of legislation?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jill, for that question. So one thing is this bill has not had a hearing yet. The House is in recess, unfortunately, even though some of us think that we should be coming back from recess because there is a lot of work that needs to be done on behalf of 11.7 million Ohioans. So we should be coming back from recess in September, and it would be great if everyone could reach out to our Speaker of the House, Larry Householder, and our Senate President, Larry Obhoff, to ask for this to have a hearing. As I said, we have a resolution, a concurrent resolution in the House and in the Senate about racism being a public health crisis. We've been continuing to talk about COVID-19 and finding solutions to address the issues that our constituents are dealing with. This is fundamental to all of that. And so we can't have these disjointed conversations trying to find solutions. We have to look at these things holistically and not in silos. And water affordability and House Bill 639 is paramount to those conversations. And so as you're talking to your other stakeholder groups and doing your advocacy, if you can ask for this to have a hearing and just continue to put this in the conversation with racism as a public health crisis, as well as coronavirus, it will help move the conversation, and we can move this piece of legislation and others around it that we are working on with evictions, which obviously I talked about how this connects to that. So that would be helpful.
That's great. Well, thank you for that. We so appreciate your talk and your time. So thank you. And we will continue to support the bill. Absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jill,
Yes.
if I may ask Attorney Representative Crowley, thank you for one. Do you have any of our representative from the state of Michigan working with you on this endeavor with this bill?
I do not. Thank you, Councilwoman Adams, for that question. I have not been in communication directly with any legislators from the state of Michigan on this, but happy to, if you are working with a legislator directly, and if you are happy to connect us, please do. I would love to. Like I said, I've been working with Crystal Davis and Christie and Ohio Environmental Council, and I know that they have connections in the legislature. And so if they're willing to connect me, I definitely want to be in a collaborative effort on this.
You got it. That's our job, right, Reverend Pinckney? Thank you.
Thank you again.
Jill, can we ask one question of the state rep before she leaves?
Sure, go ahead, Monica.
Yes, ma'am. I know it's got to be quick, state rep, but I know that Ohio actually dedicated over the last maybe 4 or 5 years to do some training around racial sensitivity with leaders across the state of Ohio. And so is there any role that time that was committed to doing that racial sensitivity training, do you think that also has played a role in advancing Ohio along the lines of water affordability? Because of their ability to actually be more sensitive to communities that may not be exactly like them or may be different?
That's a great question. And so I think yes and no. So when we talk about cultural competency, implicit bias, explicit bias, and racism, and training around that, as far as legislators, there really hasn't been a lot of training in that area. Now, there has been over with the state agencies, but with legislators, which I think is vitally important to understand how communities are impacted by our policies, there hasn't been much. And there has been in the news lately because we had a senator who made some remarks in the Senate hearing a couple of weeks ago as we were discussing, as there was a hearing on racism being a public health crisis around COVID-19. He said, is the Black community impacted more by coronavirus because colored people don't wash their hands as much as other people, other communities? And we know by 2 things. One, saying colored people, that term goes back several decades, as well as just the inference that Black people or people of color do not wash their hands, or are dirty or less hygienic than other communities, is also something that goes back several decades in when we look at white supremacy and racism. And so because of that, there was the president of the Senate asked for there to be training on racism and implicit bias, and there was a 1-hour training for senators. We know that 1 hour is not enough to talk about how these notions of, or saying things like colored people, or inferring that there's a population that's less hygienic, how that's deep-seated, and how, and this was he's also a doctor, working in the emergency room. And so how that thinking impacts the people that he serves in the emergency room, and we see how that plays out with maternal and infant health, but how that impacts his thinking impacts the policies that gets drafted and implemented into law. And so I think he's not alone. He just was the one who asked the question. But and then there's senators who came out and spoke on his behalf and said he's a great person, that this is, like, get over it. I don't know why people are making a big deal about it. And this is another legislator too. So I think we definitely have a lot of work to do in Ohio around racism and how that impacts the policies, and how that has disproportionate impacts on different communities. So I think as as the government as a whole has been having some trainings around cultural competency, but it really hasn't been holistic. It hasn't been in depth. And I think it's important for us legislators to have this training. We tend to think, some of my colleagues tend to think that because they're not impacted by it, it doesn't exist. And that's not true. And some of my legislators who tend to speak up about disproportionate impacts have rural communities. And so that's when you see them speaking up, because their rural community is impacted. So we do have I know it's a long answer, I apologize, but we have a lot of work to do in this area, and a lot of conversations that need to be had. That's why we can't have them in silos.
Absolutely. No. Thank you for that.
Wow. Thank you.
Great. Well, I know we have to let Representative Crowley go, but we so appreciate that time. So I just want to check in, do a time check in terms of Christy. Would you like me to take questions now and before our next speaker?
Yeah, I figured we can do a few questions from the first panelist with Councilwoman Adams and Reverend Pinckney, and I know Representative Erica Crowley had. Oh, I'm sitting here talking. I'm sorry.
Oh, we heard you most of it. Now you're
Jill, can I ask a question of Councilmember Adams?
Oh, please.
Yes, Councilmember Adams, could you talk about some of the thinking and the processing that you have led around advancing the curriculum concept to make sure that water and water management and the water quality issues are presented to young people early in their development so that they're embracing water and water justice?
Well, I cannot take any credit personally for what the Water Council has been doing in trying to educate those that are in charge of our schools, which is the Benton Harbor Area School Board. They take things and address it to them, and I guess they kind of like oversee whatever process that they start. But if they ever run into a problem at trying to get something done, that's when the council can bring things before the city elect, and we'll take it from there. That's when we become involved. and just make sure that there's oversight and accountability for making sure that things are done to ensure that the water is safe to drink. And at this point, I don't know where things are, but we're still handing out water. We still have a lot of lead lines that are being replaced. Actually, just last week, finally, I was able to get a young man from Blue Conduit to give a presentation on our Planning Economic Development Committee to try and get the other colleagues to hear how they keep data on homes and how easy it is for them to find and locate lead lines as opposed to what we've been doing. I don't know how far we are in the process. We've had our challenges, believe me, with some of the people that we hire that has a problem with taking directives and doing what they're supposed to do. I think that we have some people that think politics is a game when it comes to people's lives. And it seems to me that that's what we've been ending up with, but we're going to keep fighting, keep striving to get people in place and in order to where they value lives over profits. But the fight will continue to ensure that our children, all our residents, all humans have safe drinking water.
Absolutely.
And I just want to thank you for that.
Piggyback on that real fast?
Oh, please do, Reverend.
Yes, we have the superintendent of schools here in the city of Benton Harbor, the principal of the high school, and also on yesterday we had the president of the school board with us, actually handing out water, and we had a team of maybe 8 to 9 students of the city of Benton Harbor who are now members of the Benton Harbor Water Council, and they were responsible actually for putting the water into the cars, and because for that many cases of water, I know I wouldn't have been able to continue at that rate, but we definitely got them involved. We got the school superintendent, we got the school principal, and we got the president of the school board all working with us. So I hope that kind of answered your question a little bit, Monica.
I'm glad that they're understanding that they are the leaders of tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we see their leadership right now. So they're not waiting till tomorrow to lead. They're doing it right now by helping and supporting the work that both of you are leading in Benton Harbor. And then my last part of my question would be, is there any mandatory reporting as it relates to shutoffs in Benton Harbor? Is there a requirement by the utility to keep records on who's being shut off and who's being restored?
As of now, yes. Actually, before the governor ordered that no shutoffs are to be done in the state of Michigan, I had put forth that motion, because if this thing, and I immediately just tell that this thing is serious and that nobody's water should be shut off, and some people had, and they had to go back out and turn it back on, because how can somebody wash their hands? But as of right now, we're slowly opening up, and as it is right now, nobody's water is supposed to be off, because we're still in the state of an emergency. And thank you for that question, because I will definitely be checking as of the time that we get off of this webinar.
Well, thank you, Councilwoman Adams. Thank you, Monica, for the question. I think I just want to add that it's really the collaborative nature of both the Councilwoman and Reverend Pinckney, who they work together, they support each other. The Councilwoman has been at community council meetings, community water council meetings since the beginning, and she has made sure that that water council is recognized within the city structure, and that has been so good to see. And Reverend Pinckney, he reaches out to the schools, as you just heard, but all sorts of entities to make sure that things are happening. And so I just want to commend both of you. I know you wouldn't say that yourselves, but you do an amazing job of collaborating with everyone, even when that is clearly difficult because there might be some personalities happening. So thank you for all your great work. It's really amazing.
Thank you, Jill.
Absolutely. We had one question come in that I want to see if Christy or Alicia can address. Hold on, there it is. Has anyone mapped the areas identified in the Teodoro report on affordability to Republican districts in Ohio who could be allies of the bill? So we're talking again about Rep. Crawley's bill. And I don't know if that mapping has been done.
So I did answer it in the chat, but the bill or the report didn't go into that level of detail, unfortunately, as to which cities really are struggling. It took kind of an overview. I'm assuming maybe we could, through OEC and Alliance for the Great Lakes, reach out to Manny to see if we can get the raw data to see what that looks like. But it is a good thought. We have had conversations with both Republicans and Democrats about this piece of legislation. Some more promising than others, but there are some Republicans that are optimistic as well. It just, the devil's in the details.
Excellent, thank you, Christy. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Alicia?
I was just going to say the same, that it did not dive into the details or the mapping, but GIS is so important to understand the affordability as it relates to the entire state. And I think that that's something that would be necessary for us to do in order to really get some numbers out there. So thank you for that question, Elizabeth.
Yeah, it's a great question. And one of the things that we've been working on with partners is we have an app that we're now able to use to find out where people have been shut off. We have to get to them. It's not as if it's mining data, it's creating data. But we are starting to work on some of those tools that people could access from their devices and put their information in, since it's become really clear over the pandemic that most cities do not keep good records about who has been shut off, especially after a year or 2 years, where they're often purging people from their records. So there are some new tools we're testing out.
And that's something, Jill, that we also will probably talk about during the strategic session on tomorrow with Dr. Shetty and some of the master students.
Okay, okay.
If I may, Jill, while Alicia is here with us, because I thank this young woman. You know, I can't take all the credit for the relationship that me and the Water Council has, but this young woman has been a thick piece of thread that has been woven things together as well. And I thank you and her team.
It is my humble responsibility and pleasure. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I see we're at time. So I want to turn it back to Monica to introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jill, and thank you, Commissioner and Reverend Pinckney, to the state rep, and then all the amazing team of Alicia and Christy and Alexis and Brandon that are a part of pulling all of this together, and Ann. As you've heard, some of what actually is fueling advancing water affordability is the fact that it's people power, that it's people being considerate and concerned enough about other people that you saw Freshwater Future actually send staff to Benton Harbor to support the community organizing for its own support of water justice. What you saw is a delegation of folks coming to Detroit and Flint supporting community-led work. And so this is the model that we're putting forward. This is why we're so celebratory about the work of Freshwater Futures, because they get it, that it is community that must lead in these efforts to lead us toward greater water justice for all. So now we're at 11:20, and it's my pleasure to introduce our federal leadership. So at the federal level, we have Congresswoman Tlaib, and we also have Representative Lawrence's office being represented by Sister Nora Tabi. And please, Sister Tabi, if I've mispronounced that, forgive me. But Nora Tabi is representing Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence's office, and she will be talking about the Water Act and really what's behind the bill and why this bill is critical and strategic for advancing water and the human right to water and accessibility across the nation. So right now, I'll turn it over to Representative Brenda Lawrence's office and Ms. Tabi.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yes. So I just want to say good morning to everyone and hope you all are well. So I'd like to start off by thanking the organizers for putting on this event and inviting my office and me to participate in this webinar today. As mentioned, my name is Noor and I'm a legislative assistant in Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence's office. So I've been asked to speak about the Water Affordability, Transparency, Equity, and Reliability Act, Water Act for short. This bill has been introduced by my boss and Rep. O'Connor in the House and is championed by Senator Sanders in the Senate. So we all know that our nation's drinking water infrastructure is in a state of emergency. Many families across the country don't have access to clean, safe, and affordable drinking water. The water crisis isn't unique to our congressional district or the state of Michigan. It's unfortunately an issue that affects our entire country. When it comes to providing clean water, the US faces challenges similar to those of developing countries. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives our drinking water infrastructure a D grade and our wastewater infrastructure a D+. The EPA estimates that raw sewage overflows at least 23,000 times each year. Up to 1.7 million Americans lack access to basic plumbing facilities like toilet, tub, shower, or basic running water. Almost 200,000 households have absolutely no wastewater system, and up to 10 million homes across the US get water through lead pipes. And unbelievably, 6 years since the start of its crisis, planet still does not have clean water. So aside from having to deal with poor water quality and even toxic drinking water, lots of Americans have to pay through the roof for it. Before the coronavirus pandemic hit, nearly 14 million households were unable to afford their water bills. And those prices have increased more than 40% since 2010. Given the alarming rise in water bills over the past decade, which is expected to get much worse, we are more and more concerned about families struggling to afford and access one of the most basic human needs. So obviously our bill was introduced before we knew anything like this was going to happen. But in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have become increasingly concerned with issues regarding the provision of public water services. So this includes longstanding water rate affordability concerns and the importance of clean water to public health. I think this is especially pertinent now as hand washing is one of the most basic ways to protect individuals from COVID. So the Water Act would create a water trust fund by rolling back a portion of the Trump administration's corporate tax cuts, and it would raise the corporate income tax by 3.5%. So it would go from 21 to 24.5%. That is expected to provide up to $34.85 billion in funds, and any excess would go to the General Reserve Fund. The $34.85 billion in funding would be used primarily for existing programs and the creation and expansion of a couple others, a grant program for residential on-site sewage disposal systems, and a grant program for school drinking water improvements. So the trust fund will be used to update our water infrastructure by providing funding to drinking water and wastewater improvements. So for some quick background, most of the water pipes under our streets were built at least half a century ago following World War II. So this infrastructure is wearing out. There's a lot of water pipes that have already reached the end of their lifespan or are reaching the end of their lifespan. Every year, there are more than 240,000 water main breaks. And that ends up wasting more than 2 trillion gallons of drinking water and billions of gallons of untreated wastewater just spilled into waterways. By some estimates, our drinking water and wastewater systems need between $744 billion and $1 trillion over the next 20 years to restore infrastructure to ensure safe drinking water. which comes out to the $35 billion a year that I mentioned over the same time frame. So yeah, that's definitely a lot of money, but it's an important investment in our communities and our future. And when we look at the federal budget more broadly, that comes out to only 5% of the military budget. So our bill explicitly allows state revolving fund programs, SRF programs, to provide grants to replace lead service lines from private properties. As I mentioned earlier, nationwide, up to 10 million lead service lines deliver water to millions of people. Replacing these pipes could cost up to $30 billion nationally. For a household, it can cost more than $2,000 to replace their service line, and our bill would cover that cost. The Water Act creates an assistance program to combat PFAS contamination, which is both widespread and persistent, by allowing SRF funds to support updating treatment systems or finding alternative water supplies when community water systems and household water wells are contaminated with PFAS. In regards to the school program I mentioned earlier, with our bill, schools would receive up to $1 billion a year. That's up from what is currently $5 million a year to replace and repair not only drinking water fountains, but all infrastructure in school to ensure lead-free drinking water. Parents should not have to worry about their kids suffering serious developmental problems from drinking lead-contaminated tap water at school or at home. So decades of federal underinvestment has left a lot of communities, and in particular low-income and minority neighborhoods, with leaky and contaminated water systems. These same communities are struggling to afford access to water. For example, in the city of Detroit alone, more than 140,000 households have had their water service disconnected since 2014. Our bill helps to hold utility companies accountable for engaging in service shutoffs, discrimination, and civil rights violations. And it would do this by requiring the EPA to do two things. One is to produce guidance on what water affordability programs, and the second is requiring a study about water affordability, discrimination and civil rights violations by water and sewer providers, public participation in water regionalization efforts, and water shutoffs. Our legislation is designed to ensure that disadvantaged communities first and foremost, including small, rural, and indigenous communities, receive the funding and assistance they need. So to ensure that funds are used on communities most in need, the Water Act prohibits the Clean Water SRF funds from going to any new sprawling developments. It also amends the Drinking Water SRF to restrict funding to publicly owned water systems and small, locally owned private water systems, and allows communities to use SRF funds to buy their water systems and exit any water privatization contracts. The bill will also require states to use no less than 50% of clean water and drinking water SRF funds to provide additional subsidization to disadvantaged communities. And so that would be up from the 30% cap that currently exists. The bill also provides funding for technical assistance to help rural and small municipalities and Native communities improve their water and wastewater systems. It also creates a new grant program for residential septic tanks and drainage fields, and would dramatically expand funding to upgrade and install rural household drinking water wells. It also dedicates 3% of drinking water SRF funds as grants to Indigenous nations, and that would basically be doubling the current allotment. So lastly, our bill is expected to create almost 1 million jobs. It would also require US-made steel, prevailing wage, and union labor in projects funded by these grants. So the Water Act takes a comprehensive approach to improving our water systems and helping ensure that every person has access to safe and clean water in the US. We need major federal investments in our outdated, crumbling public water infrastructure. We need to fix our lead-ridden water pipes, stop sewage overflows, avert the water affordability crisis, and counteract emerging crises such as PFAS. This bill delivers water justice to the millions of people who currently lack access to safe water. So just to wrap up, I'm sure many of you know that HR 2, the water infrastructure package, passed the House last week, and that included some really great provisions, including providing additional funding for the Clean Water SRF, $40 billion over 5 years, and $25 billion for the Drinking Water SRF. Congresswoman Lawrence offered an amendment to HR 2, which passed, which uses Section 3 of the Water Act, which I talked about earlier, which would require a study on water affordability, water rates, shutoffs, and the effectiveness of SRF funding for promoting affordable, equitable services. And as I mentioned, the study would also investigate any discriminatory practices. So that's everything I have. I just want to thank the organizers again for inviting me and putting on this great event.
Thank you so much, Noor Tabib, and thank you so much to Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence's office for all of her leadership and work on the Water Act. For those that are listening, we would actually hope that you would take the time to actually pay attention to what's embedded in this bill. Wants to just emphasize again the Water Affordability, Transparency, Equity, and Reliability Act of 2019, and it would create a trust fund of approximately $35 billion to address many of the water disparities and issues that we've been talking about today.
Monica?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it Monica? Was that you?
Yes.
Okay, a question. Can you put that link to that bill in the,
Yes.
I need to study it. My question would be, after listening to State Representative Crowley and what Congresswoman's Brenda Lawrence's Nora, I don't want to mispronounce your name.
It's okay.
Representative, what do you suggest in my thinking about the question that I asked State Representative about our state representatives of Michigan getting with her as well as some others around the country and gaining up on this thing nationally with Congresswoman Lawrence? Is that how this is supposed to work? I'm just still trying to figure out how we get things like this done in the masses.
Yes, ma'am.
Sure.
Ms. TV, do you want to take that?
I think like we are always interested in working with stakeholders. Our job in Congress is to push the community's needs forward. So we're always happy to work with communities, local communities and stakeholders.
And to add to that, City Councilwoman, yes, the Congresswoman desperately needs our support to advance the Water Act. And we would be more than happy to make sure that all of the information that that Ms. TB has is shared with you. And then also if there are other information that you may need, we may need to have a conversation with Christy about setting up possibly a briefing so that you feel fully informed on how you can be a part of pushing this forward. But the role of this gathering is to help all of the leaders that are listening in to connect their work locally to the work state, to the work federal, so that we're creating a massive push to move and advance water affordability. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your question. That was very, very timely. And so the next person that we have, do we have the Congresswoman queued up, Christy or Alexis?
It looks like she is in.
Yeah, I'm ready to roll, Monica, when you are.
Oh, wow. Well, I can't see you, Congresswoman, but I am so excited to know you're there. I would like to introduce to some and present to others. She is a leader. She is a fighter. She is a person that will pick up her phone and answer you and actually call you back. She has provided exceptional leadership around not only the water issue, but other environmental issues. And so the bill that we would hope that she would speak to today is the bill that she has led on and actually has advanced, which is the Emergency Water as a Human Rights Bill. And so I am going to kick it to my homegirl and a great water warrior herself, the Honorable Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
Oh, no, thank you so much, Monica. That's so humbling. I'll tell you, if you grow up in Detroit, you listen to the mothers of Detroit. So they're the ones who told me, go make water a human right. And that's what we've been doing. But I'm so incredibly blessed to have a team that has worked with not only People's Water Board, but just some incredible activists on the ground that have been talking about this issue way before it became popular to talk about it, way before the pandemic came along. They were talking about it before Flint happened. They were talking about access to clean water, but also affordability of water. So I want to thank all of you for continuing to uplift this issue in a very powerful way that is meaningful and actually translating into real change. And I'm so happy. I sometimes cannot believe this is happening, but we got two very strong initiatives that was really rooted in the community here in the 13th Congressional District passed out of the House. The first one was the lead service line replacement amendment. This is a historic amendment. Over 100 environmental groups supported it. It adds $22.5 billion for comprehensive lead service line replacement. So it's also full replacement. This is really important because my team told me, in the past, they would do these grants for partial. Well, you all know no amount of lead is not poisoned. And so priority is now given completely to, for these project grants of the $22.5 billion to serve disadvantaged communities that look like ours, environmental justice communities, with significant representation of communities of color, low-income communities, and tribal and also indigenous communities that experience a high, are experiencing more of an at-risk exposure to lead. We received bipartisan support, y'all. That is huge. We got about 8 Republican members to join us, and we passed it again with bipartisan support. So you tell people that is bipartisan support, that we believe lead does not belong in water, and no one should drink, poisoned water. So we're going to continue at full stop saying water is a human right. The next thing that passed out of the House successfully as well was emergency water as a human right, which prioritizes 3 very, very important immediate actions, which is 1, a federal moratorium on water shutoffs; 2, low-income assistance to get people's water back on immediately. So this would be direct payment to our neighbors instead of going through these quasi-governmental authorities to get to our people. We're not going to do it. We're going to work directly with the families and let them have some sort of human dignity as they try to get access to water. Third is really strong language, and this is so important. We fought really hard for this, and Monica, man, I know this, but we fought really hard with this with our committee staff, but they finally said, okay, we're with you, is that not only do we want a moratorium, not only do we want, obviously getting the low assistance payments for folks, but we have very strong language that require reconnection for homes that had water off since before the crisis. This is important because even when we do these grants, what we notice, and Monica, many of our water warriors here at home and even in everywhere have told us it doesn't actually result in real reconnection for families. So this requires that reconnection happens. This legislation is a long time coming, something that I've been working on this past year, and thank you to all of you for bringing credibility for this. And I know, yes, this is happening a lot to my residents in the 13th Congressional District and throughout really Wayne County and communities like Flint, but 15 million Americans across the country are facing some sort of water shutoffs. And so it's so important. And, my residents, as you all know, are getting their water shut off, turned off for overdue bills exceeding $150, while companies like Pepsi and Coke were allowed to keep bottling tap water in Detroit despite the just the increased number of tens of thousands of dollars of overdue water bills. So we know it has been unjust, and we're exposing that through our movement work here. So I just want you all to know, we just found out today that Senator Merkley and Senator Elizabeth Warren is going to introduce a Senate companion to this. This is really important that it happens this month. Many of you are going to get an email from Andrew on my team letting you know in the next couple of weeks is where we need to really pump up, and I want your partnership on this, Pumping Up Water as a Human Right Fund, the $1.5 billion. But this is where I think in the next couple of weeks, the Senate's going to decide what they're going to move. And so we're going to have a Senate companionship with the leadership of the 2 senators. We're going to continue talking about this, but this is the time to start beating the drum a little bit louder as we try to get the Senate to approve it so we can get it to the president's desk. So I'm really excited. I mean, these are two huge historic legislation that passed out of the House, one with bipartisan support, and I think we're going to probably be able to get it back from the Senate with bipartisan support. And it's really all due to the fact that you all helped put a human face to this. You never gave up. You never let them gaslight us to believe that this wasn't possible. And so I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for that partnership. And, you know, my team and I, you know, we walk around like every time somebody brings up anything, I don't care if it's small business or whatever, I say, well, you want to stop the spread of disease and all this stuff. Let's talk about water first, because there will not be an economy without water. There will not be any kind of true effective resolution to any of what's going on and the pain that's going on in our country if we don't get access to water for people. So again, thank you again for the bottom of my heart. And I'm really excited about the possibility this month of hearing that the Senate has passed this and it's going to the president's desk.
Wow, that is huge, Congresswoman. And thank you so much for your exceptional leadership. I know that you're out there fighting, and definitely want to just continue to lift up that the over 15 million Americans are still struggling with water insecurity right now in a pandemic. That's
Question,
a little,
Monica?
it's chilling. So yes, ma'am, I want to definitely open it up for questions, especially while we have the time of the Congresswoman now with us. Is that Councilwoman Adams speaking?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, go right ahead.
Thank you, Monica. And thank you, Congresswoman Tlaib. You are one of my favorite women that rock up there on the hill, okay? I thank you. My question is, after watching the backdrop and everything that was going on when President Trump went to visit oh gosh, our fabulous mountain of, I forgot.
Mount Rushmore?
Mount Rushmore. I learned that our native brothers and sisters don't have access to water at all. Does something like this I mean, we're in America, supposed to be the grandest land on the face of the earth. And there's nothing united about our states until we do things like exactly what we're doing right now to unite ourselves. But for our native indigenous people to not have access to water, we can do a pipeline, but we can't do water. I mean, that just tears my heart apart. So is something like that included in this bill?
Yeah, we include the territories. And I want you to know, Congresswoman Deb Haaland always speaks up and is in full support of water as a human right. When this came up, she reached out. She's a co-sponsor. She's one of the first Native American women ever elected. And she talks about this all the time. She even talks, she tries to translate it to folks to understand that the COVID numbers are so high among our Native American, our Native brothers and sisters. And so we are definitely very inclusive of our indigenous communities and do not exclude them. I know that I see that a lot in other legislation, but we very much include them in here. And every time we bring this up, we talk about it not only in like this is an urban setting, it's so important. And Monica knows this. This is happening in rural communities, is happening in Native communities. So it is happening. I don't think anybody in our country or any state in our country is not affected by an affordability of water, lead infested water, or the water shut off that is happening across the country. So we definitely are including everyone.
Thank you, and we will be supporting.
Thank you for the question. And I'd like someone posed a question that I think it would be great if you could answer about both acts, which is, are there protections against privatization? And there's some concern about the Voluntary Water Partnership Act that Senator Duckworth is introducing. So would either the Water Act or the Water as a Human Right Act address that?
So I know in the Water as a Human Right Act, you know, there was a move, there was trying to attempt to move by some colleagues to have it go to the utility companies versus the low income assistance program to the residents. We pushed back on that and we won. And so you might still see legislation, because I want you to know that's the Senate. The Senate was pushing that kind of approach, and we pushed back and said no. We, you know, it's similar to what we see in LAHEAP with the, you know, with utility shutoffs. We wanted to take that approach, and we talked to community action agencies that are really the ones on the ground that are getting, you know, helping get plumbers out or helping people with the shutoff. That, you know, so we talked to them, and they said when we can directly work with the resident, it's best. And so in that way, but there is no other language specifically saying you know, what I think is the intent of the question is, how do we stop the privatization of water? I'm the vice chair of subcommittee on environment in the House Oversight Committee. And we did send a letter, would love to share it with you. Miriam is on this, she can send it through chat. But we are actually trying to expose Nestle and expose that kind of approach, you know, the fact that they have access to water like for $300. And so we are pushing back on that and exposing that, but we're using the power of the letterhead and asking them for, you know, sending House Oversight Committee, sending that letter, asking for answers to a lot of these questions so we can expose this move that we know is very evident of, you know, pushing back. It's interesting because I think one of their answers, you know, we always center a lot of our work on, you know, Flint and other communities that obviously have been at the center of why water needs to be a human right. And it's interesting because they came back saying, oh, no, don't worry. We gave 18,000 bottled water to Flint. And you know, the disconnect of understanding what they don't get it. Like, no one should have to get bottled water. They should have clean water coming into their homes. And so, again, this doesn't directly answer the question, but just to, you know, that there was moves by, you know, they are so-called authorities that they think there's some public, but we already know these are authorities that are really quasi-governmental and are run by a lot of the for-profit entities. And so we pushed back on that and said, no, we didn't want them at the, you know, they're taking the taxpayer dollars and doing whatever they want.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate that. Thank you for the answer. Ms. Tebe, would you like to answer that one?
Sure. So our bill definitely limits private community water systems. So it would amend the eligibility for the drinking water SRF funding to only publicly owned and operated drinking water utilities and small water systems, small private water systems that serve fewer than 10,000 customers and don't own any other systems, so that it's not any large corporations that are taking subsidized loans.
All right, well, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Let's see. Checking for other questions. Monica, did you have any questions you wanted to pose to Congresswoman Tlaib or to Ms. Tebe?
Yes, I had a question for Ms. Tebe as it relates to the Water Act. I know that the Congresswoman is really working feverishly with food and water action to really move this forward. But one of the things that we would definitely want to see if we could garner more support around is being able to get possibly over the next couple of days and weeks more conversations going at the grassroots level to be able to disseminate that information out. And so if you could help us with that, that would be extremely helpful in advancing, I think, the policy. I know that Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib has done some similar kinds of interactive kinds of virtual meetings. And so if there is that opportunity over just the next week or so, Ms. Tebe, I would love to entertain that opportunity.
Yeah, Monica, I'd be happy to connect with you offline and chat about this more.
Thank you. Thank you. And then to Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, I know that when you were looking at this, at the Water is a Human Rights Act, that definitely looking at LAHEAP was a part of that. But could you also talk about, as we're looking at LIHEAP, I know that there's also some other components like a community benefits agreement for water infrastructure that the community has lifted. Is there an opportunity to continue to push that forward?
So you know how passionate I am about community benefits agreements.
I know.
Because this is the national bill, you know, I go from being in the state house for 6 years and being able to have a little bit more control to on the federal level, what, you know, Miriam and my team has investigated, you know, we did a research. Not all of our water systems across the country is the same. So what we did is it will be up to the states and us to advocate on the state level what it looks like. I say LIHEAP just for folks to understand, like, what we're trying to do is get directly to the residents. Even LIHEAP still has obviously issues because it's the residents don't even get to touch the money. It goes directly to DTE or whatever it is. But the way we left it is because some states are different in how they're providing water. And we were, you know, we got a lot of pushback like, well, that's not how they do it in this state and so forth. But the fact of the matter is the money, if they apply for that grant, Monica, they have to have these 3 components, and how they try to do it will be up to obviously that state administration. And that's where we can come in, right? When, I mean, at this time we have a friendly governor, but we would be able to work with the Health and Human Services folks and others to say this is what it should look like. So I hope that will happen. But we needed to be careful in how we said, well, you need to do it this way. We just put the criteria, but Miriam will let you know. I mean, trust me, like one of the things I said is, oh, they should do it this way, they should do it that way. And then our legislative council people, the lawyers that put this together said, well, not every state has it the same way, set up the same way. Some of it's completely privatized, as you all know. And so, but I think the way what you're asking is, what will that program look like to get directly to the low-income families? I hope our state decides it should go through community action agencies. That's personally what I think would be best. But because there's community action agencies in all these other communities, but is that really going to help maybe our indigenous communities? I don't know. And that would be up to us as people on the ground saying, this is how you need to make sure that it gets access to the residents that need the aid to get their water back on.
And also, would that be something, Congresswoman, that could be tie-barred in terms of federal dollars to the state revolving fund?
Yep, so that's it. So you're talking about my other bill, which is still in the make. You're talking about my other bill where we do actually attach it to the revolving fund. But Mary, the one that I sent you, yeah. Like by the way, all the bills, before I introduce them, I send it to you and everybody. So, but before we introduce it, we'll tell you, but you're talking about, so the other one is the one that is really, like, to me, is going to have a little bit us having more control about what they do with the money. But yeah, we saying you can't get no money from the revolving fund until you have an affordability plan, period. You're not going to get it. Skipping it on, you know. And so it is definitely going to be controversial, not for us and the people, but to those that obviously, don't want water to be accessible. They want to be able to have the corporate, greed schemes in there. But yeah, I'm excited about that one, especially, Monica.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Jill, this is why we have to send deputized water warriors to Congress, state houses. Yes. We got to all baptize them and deputize them before they go.
You all, so all of you don't remember Mama Lila Cabell, but when you're, so Mama Lila, if we were on a panel together, I don't care where it was, I don't even have to be on the panel. As soon as I saw the water bottles, I was like, here it goes. She will come off and like knock the bottled water off the table. And she's like, stop, no one should, I mean, it made me, every time I see anybody with bottled water, even on my campaign, on anything, I'm like, I think of her. That's how much she just drilled it. She's like, look at you. You're all perpetuating this. This is what's going to happen. We're going to all have to start paying for water, clean water. They don't want to give us clean water because they know if they don't give us clean water, they're going to, that's how they did it with the school system, right? They let the school system deteriorate to the point where like, here comes the private entity saying, let me come on here and fix it for y'all. And you see what happens, right? They're just making money and we still don't got quality public education. So, but I do want, Councilwoman Adams, you know, my
And
experience.
you just mentioned something that I'm going to go back to when you mentioned action agencies. Now, what I've learned in my community is that Benton Harbor itself has not been serviced properly due to the fact of other entities such as action agencies. It's like a variant, a county-wide thing, and the people that it's actually meant for go unserviced. Places like Cornerstone,
Yes.
which is the stone of spurring economic development within the community. Yet Benton Harbor residents go underserved. And the only thing that I've been able to come up with in fixing it is to take out, because Benton Harbor, the Cornerstone used to be within the city government itself. I don't know what happened, but I know something needs to change. So you give me a little guidance here. What I've come up with is that our planning and economic development department that seems to need to be separated, because community development takes care of those block grant dollars, and that's taken care of. Economically, it needs to take care of those other things, and not Action Agency, Cornerstone Alliance, or anybody else, to ensure that the citizens of Benton Harbor are being serviced. So if we were to separate that, and which we're about to do in the midst of, making that a department in itself to be able to take funds, donations, or what have you for development within our community to where we can tangibly see things.
Yeah, and you know, Councilwoman Adams, you know, that's why when we get water as a human right passed out of the Senate and passed into law, it is going to be our responsibility to convene a meeting with the state to say this is what we think it should look like in our communities. And maybe it's different in every community. I say that because, you know, right now I'm noticing who's touching my people the most, and maybe it's because it's intentional that way. I don't know, but it could be different. In my county, it's different maybe in your county. So absolutely, as soon as this happens, I mean, Miriam and even my team knows, as soon as this passes, I immediately want to talk to the state about what is that going to look like? Because my biggest worry is that they don't put it under Health and Human Services, because I want it to be considered a public health issue, right? But again, you all are the experts on the ground. You may think, you know what, maybe it needs its own like division. I don't know. But that's going to be up to us to decide. But I think, you know, Michigan's going to be different from other states. And that's why we didn't emphasize, we wanted to pump the money in. We said, these are the 3 priorities the money can be used for. How it's distributed is going to be up to the states. And that's where we come in.
Exactly. And that's what I've noticed for, before I even became an elected official. The money is coming, but it's not touching where it needs to.
I know.
So and that's the type of thing that made me step up to the plate and be the change that I want to see, feel, and live.
Yeah, it's implementation is so important, because so much gets passed, but how it gets implemented is really that is where the effectiveness comes in. And so you could keep throwing money at something like community development, but if your neighborhood is not getting actually affordable housing or it's really hard. But what I wanted to tell you all is where local communities and local city councils and commissions and all those that come in on this is, you know, my work on a $15 minimum wage was back in 7 years ago. And we were starting this movement. We were talking about getting it on the ballot. As you know, I think we tried to get it on the ballot twice. When I was organizing around that, and then I got elected to the state house, what we did is, you know, we kept getting local cities to pass resolutions in support of a $15 minimum wage, right? Or that they implement it themselves. I use this as an example to tell you that nothing stops local government saying water needs to be a human right and push this agenda. So that's how you can support the movement, because finally this last year, you know, Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence, all of us were able to vote on a $15 minimum wage increase so we passed that out of the one fair wage. We passed that out of the House. It's in the Senate, but still, if it wasn't for some of the local community work with our local city councils, our local commissions, that would have never reached the halls of Congress. And so know whatever bill or act that you're trying to do and how you can influence it is in letting the drums beat really loud on the local level, so that when we're out there fighting on the House floor for it, we're saying, well, we got, 100 city councils have passed a resolution in support of this, right? And that's how you can continue to build it.
And I'm glad that you said that, because this evening we have a public safety committee meeting, and I think that our chairman needs to put forth a resolution stating that water is a human right, and nobody's shall be turned off, and those that are off shall be turned on. Yeah.
And that's
my fight
being
tonight.
echoed in our question box. And so I just want to say, it sounds like with this moving now to the Senate, with the Water is a Human Right Act moving to the Senate, that's probably the place where we can best ensure that we're not turning people off again at whatever the close of COVID is. I mean, would you agree with that, Congresswoman, in terms of people are asking, how do we make sure the water stays on?
Yeah, no. Our bill was introduced, our move to this bill was introduced before COVID. It just became more important to them. It became relevant after COVID. So yes, I'm one of the legislators that used COVID and the pandemic to push this. And I said, great, by the way, y'all keep telling us to wash our hands. I have this bill that will actually get people water to wash their hands. So, you had governors and people saying, go wash your hands, 10 times a day, all this stuff. So this was an opportunity, and the pandemic is tragic. I mean, what happened to my communities, and I mean, watching my neighbors literally die because they didn't even know it was happening. Nobody was reaching out to them. But at the same time, this pandemic has now made a lot of this stuff that we've been talking about, right, relevant. And so just for whoever asked the question, this is pre and post pandemic. This is not just about the pandemic, but the pandemic is making it much more relevant and much more possible. And so we're gonna get on that momentum, and we're gonna get it out of the Senate. And this is why right now, this is where you all can come in. And I just saw Reverend Pickney's on. Hey. No, we work together at Sugar Law Center, so I was just saying hello.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Good to hear your voice.
Your case file's this big in the office. I love it.
Well, I'm gonna see, can I get a little bit higher? So that's how you get things.
Keep fighting. You're on the right side.
That's right. That's how we get things done.
Absolutely. Well, I see we're at the top of the hour. I know you all are busy and need to get back to your other work, but we so appreciate you taking the time to be with us. This has been so helpful. And every one of you had something we needed to hear. And so thank you for that. We will be holding a strategy session tomorrow. And so we'll be putting this right to work. And I'm going to turn it back over to Monica to close us out.
Thank you so much, Jill. Just want to say a boatload of gratitude to the Honorable Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, to Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence's office, and Sister TB, to all of the leadership that we see and feel and know is happening in Benton Harbor with Reverend Pinckney, with Councilwoman, I almost said Congresswoman, Councilwoman Adams, and then the amazing work that's happening out of the Water Council. And so we just want to say how much we're thankful for you. We can't say enough about your leadership, and we continue to want to see you out there in the community making sure that water is a human right and that water is clean, safe, affordable, and accessible. So I'll leave it there, Jill, and back to you.
All right.
Water is a human right.
Thank you so much. Christy, do you have final words for us?
I would just ask everybody if you could take a moment, pick up your phone, call your congressional members, ask them to not only support these very important bills, Emergency Water is a Human Right and the Water Act, but to work with their colleagues on both sides of the aisle to swiftly pass them. And just really thank you to the panelists. Thank you for your leadership. To all the public servants, really appreciate all the attendees joining us today as well. Thank you.
Christy, great job today.
Thank you. Thank
Great
each and
job.
every one of you. Stay safe.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Thanks to Monica.
It's been a pleasure.
Take care. Bye-bye.
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 Thank you all.
Thank you.